Hey guys, it's Kris Jones, and
Chris Nash. Hi, everybody.
for episode 75 of Ask Us Anything, this is on setting up your business, working on your business instead of in your business. We chatted about the importance of the three P's: planning, procedures, and now policy. Policy is the part where you tie this all together. So why is it important to separate policy out from procedures?
I think procedures are the process. It's the actual getting things done, but a policy actually creates the framework for how that's structured, and it creates the idea that you're going to instill this across your entire organization. Yeah. There's repetition involved, and people have either a document or something online to reference. They have something concrete they can look to. I think there's this idea. Let's take the average household, and just use kind of a funny example. When you come home as a father or a mother, I think your children have a good sense of what your sort of parenting style is, and they may take advantage of you because they know you're a little more lenient on one side versus the other. I think that's a classic example of the difference in policy in an organization. Okay, this is how I need. Yeah. This is how I do things under this leadership or in this organization, and this is how we do things over here. Yeah. And a policy creates that, but you need to make it concrete. You need to have documentation written up about it, and that's one area, in my opinion, particularly as it relates to small business, where people do not take the time to actually draft their policies in a document and then make it a part of their literally daily credo to actually teach that to everybody.
The thing I love, the reason why this is required by successful entrepreneurs is that it provides that checklist. It provides that documentation that is used to be able to evaluate performance, to be able to just hold people accountable, right? And I mean this in a positive way. I've always been of this belief that as an entrepreneur, you don't want to be in the business of looking for reasons why people disappoint you.
For sure.
Or I'm also not a fan at all. I'd strongly encourage people not to do this, is to set people up in a sort of test. Like, don't give them the tools to succeed. Just go do it, and then I'm going to grade you. Screw that.
Right.
Give them the plan.
Exactly.
Right? Give them the process. This is the policy that we use here. When a lead comes in, this is how we deal with that lead. And by the way, if you have some suggestions on how to improve this, we could do a workshop, we could do a one-on-one, we could do that. But this is what you do when the lead comes in. This is what you do when you hang up the phone,
right,
or when you leave a meeting. At the end of a meeting, you hear it. And when you hear someone say it, because I do it a lot, you take a note or you say, hey, I should do that. At the end of the meeting, someone says, next steps. What are the next steps? How often do you attend a business meeting when someone doesn't say that and you feel like, what did we just...
Or here's another great catchphase for that. Yeah. What are our action items? And then I think you have to assign those to somebody.
Yeah.
But that's actually part of a perfect example of where if there was a policy in place that at the end of every meeting, you always talked about next steps and you assigned those to somebody. That's a classic example of just having a meeting because you're like, oh, we have to tackle this problem. Yeah. We have to put out this fire. And then at the end of it, everyone leaves and goes, wow, there were some great ideas in that meeting, but nobody knows who's doing what. Yeah. That's a perfect example of where policy comes into play.
Yeah. Some of the things, what are some of the more popular sort of documentations that a company should have?
I think you'll see this at large organizations. They have handbooks. They have culture documents. That's actually something that's become pretty popular. But I think even large companies don't go far enough in this way. And policy needs to be documented and repeated all the way down at the micro level. And I know that sounds so over the top on one hand, but creating a process and then teaching that process to your staff, I think, is part of the policy. It has to be driven down. So, if you're talking about what you do after you hang up the phone with a potential sales prospect, that policy needs to be obviously written in some kind of format and easily referenced. But the idea being, it's not just some document that sits out there. It has to be something that you hold yourself accountable to.
Yeah.
So, I think there's this great example with Chet Holmes where he made a rule that you could not interrupt him for what he calls, do you have a minute meeting, 1 minute meetings.
Got a minute? Yeah.
Yeah, and so...
Because they're never a minute, right?
Well, they're never a minute. Not only that, if you're trying to do something, as we all know, and you get interrupted 20 times, you're never going to accomplish that task. So his idea was that we're not going to have 1 minute meetings. You cannot come to me for 1 minute. If you have a question, basically you can make an appointment with me, and then he would deal with them all in like a 1 to 2 hour period during the day, and then you would come and address it. And he became so much more productive. Yeah. But the policy part of that was when anyone ever came to him, he said, "I'm sorry, I don't do it. Please sign up on my form." And that's a classic example of actually executing the policy.
To be fair, let's tie this together. So one thing we hadn't mentioned in much detail in the previous 2 videos is that part of the planning process is identifying the key people or parts of your business that you should have as a founder or as a president or as a CEO or as an executive regular meetings with, so that in those meetings you're really kind of like getting an update on how the procedures are going. How is it going? And the thing about the policy side of it is that it makes it all official. So it's sort of like when you have these meetings, you could structure them around how the sales organization is going. Are we hitting our growth numbers? But you'll have as a reference the official documentation to say whether or not they're following the plan as put in place.
For sure.
And, that sounds crazy, this idea that, I would tell my staff or you would tell your staff that, they can't bother you with these got-a-minute meetings. But I'll tell you, if you wrap that into weekly or bi-weekly meetings with those individuals and you simply just say to them, this will tone it down a little bit, hey, listen, I don't have a minute right now, as you know, my policy, but let's go ahead, unless it's an emergency, because then I do have time. For sure. But if it's not, let's go ahead and just bring that up right at the beginning of our meeting, next Thursday. And so again, just think about what we're talking about here. Through the planning and processing of your business, right? Working on your business instead of in your business, you're setting up these policies, right? So that you're going to drive a much more efficient business, so that the productivity of your people, and not only of your people, but of you, you won't be so stuck in the business. Another thing he talks about is emails. So he has this rule that, is it touch it once?
Oh, it's my favorite. Yeah, touch it once.
Yeah.
And it's his own personal policy for it. It's really a time management strategy, but this idea we mentioned in a previous AMA, but the idea behind it is when you open up an email, if you look at it, then you need to handle it right there. And listen, I'm guilty of it too.
So don't open it unless you're going
to take care of it. There's so much time wasted scanning through, looking at it once, going, oh, I'll put that on the shelf and handle it later. Why even bother looking at it if you know you're going to handle it later? So, and I think the idea is once you actually shore up some of this and you actually do create your own policies for it, you'll actually have more time during the day. So if there is an emergency and somebody comes to you with a true, I need you for this minute, and it's absolutely crucial, you can actually take that minute to stop and do it because your day is actually properly structured and you have your own policy in place for how you're handling those things.
I also think things like, what time people are supposed to come in the morning, what time they're supposed to leave. I don't think you should just leave it to, assumption that there's a 9 to 5 for a lot of different reasons that doesn't work. I mean, sure. I like a policy that says, and this is hardcore, but I actually would expect my team to stay until as late as necessary, assuming they can, to deliver for our clients. So my policy would be that a client first mindset. I mean, if we're going to build an awesome organization that is going to set the example for other organizations that they want to be like us, you can't have this 9 to 5 mentality where it's like all you're doing is working for pay. The interesting thing is, in my notes here, you had said, let's bring up this idea of the cultural document. I think this conversation right now is critical. If you want to be like everybody else, just do what they're doing. If you want to be part of the 1% or the 5%, Kris has built and sold multiple businesses. You guys know my track record. You have to go above and beyond with your policies. Don't make them boilerplate. Don't make them white and vanilla. Honestly, my policy for all of my organizations is not 9 to 5. That's freaking crap.
Right.
My policy is that it's a client-centered policy, that if we've made a promise to our client, we need to deliver on that.
Period.
And so
just to interrupt you, when you're saying 9 to 5, that doesn't necessarily mean it takes longer.
Yeah.
It just takes as long as the job needs to get done.
Yeah.
You may be out of the office early on a day because you've accomplished.
That's the other side of it. To be fair, I remember when I was at Pepper Jam, Krista Golanoski, who is still there, she went above and beyond everyone. But I remember her saying that she wanted to go to Europe for the first time. And she didn't have enough PTO days left because she took them. And I said, you know what? I call her Crit, K-R-I-T. That was just her little nickname. I said, you know what, Crit? I'm like, you bust your hump and you're always focused. She was an affiliate manager. She basically was part of our quality control team. But long story short, I said, you know what, Krista? I said, if you could maintain that consistency with the work that you do, I want you to count your hours above whatever would be a custom, 40 hours a week. And I said, over the next couple months, you're going to get that 3-week vacation because you're going to earn it based on those hours, just going above and beyond. And again, so I created a culture over at Pepper Jam that was not traditional. I was looking for ways to incentivize people by prioritizing what mattered most. And just coming in from 9 to 5 isn't that way. If you could get something done in a shorter period of time, I think that's fine.
For sure.
So, guys, at the end of the day, here's what's most important to take away from these 3 videos. That the backdrop here to this whole series of 100 videos is how you can position yourself to be part of the 5% of people who go above and beyond, who actually become super successful. One of the ways of doing that is to hold yourself accountable to working on your business. I want you to do that right now. I don't want you to put it off until next year. 3 ways of doing that, as Kris and I outlined for you over these last 3 videos, is to think about and work on the planning stages, the procedure process stage, and on the policy stage of your business. You do those 3 things, and you will set yourself up for success. Do you have any closing thoughts or any parting words? We'll have you back on this video series. I still have another 20-some videos to do. But.
Yeah, I would just, as a final word of, let's say, caution, stop putting out the fires and make a plan so you don't have to have fires every day in your organization. That's really the goal.
Cool. Want to close out the video?
Hey, well, guys, listen, I'll be back. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Peace.